So now it's a new sermon series. Who's excited? Like a few people here. Bill's like, yeah. Don's like, me. I'm excited. It'll be a good time. Oh, it's okay. No, you're fine. You're fine. So, and this is a title that many pastors have done like sermons with this kind of a title. I'm doing a whole series with this title, Facing Giants, because we're going to look at facing giants, both actual giants in the Bible and sort of metaphorical giants. Giants that mean something that just seems massive, seems like beyond us to actually overcome, beyond us to actually get past. And people in the Bible who have faced these giants, how they've faced the giants, what the outcome was. And I'm looking forward to the sermon series. In fact, this will take us, I was talking about this in Bible study this morning, this will take us right to, was it Palm Sunday, which then will be Easter, which is the first Sunday in April. So it's not super early, but it's right there. It's like perfect timing right there. And I'm looking forward to see how people face giants and what we can learn from that. And of course, we got to start in the most obvious spot, don't we? We got to start in the most obvious story about facing giants. But it's true, though. It's important because we all face them, don't we? We all face some kind of giant. I'm not talking about like someone who's taller than you. I mean, for some of us, that's quite a few people. For some of us, it's not so many, depending on how tall you are. Like, for me, I'm 6 foot, but surprisingly, there's actually quite a few people who are taller than I am. And there's quite a few people who are shorter than me. So I'm kind of in the middle. People say, oh, you're pretty tall. I'm like, no, I'm kind of in the middle, actually, when it comes to height. Like Evans is short. But we face giants. We face things in our life. We've all been there, haven't we? We've all been to a point in our life. Like, raise your hand. By all means, if you want. You've been to a point in your life. You've faced something that seemed like it was beyond you. Like, even if you have faith and you trusted in God, we always have like that gut reaction, don't we? There's always that gut reaction, that sort of panic that wants to be like, it's a bit of shock when we kind of first get that news. Even though we have that faith in God, right? We trust in God. We're like, God, we know you got this. We know it's in your hands. We know it's all about you. But we all have that sort of like that shock moment where it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. That news first hits, right? We first find out about it. We kind of have that little bit of slight panic right there. Even if that faith kicks in, we still have a little bit of that shock. It's human, right? It's that reaction. We face those giants. It's life. It's about life, really, because it's part of life. We face things in life, and at times it'll seem beyond us. It's just the world we live in, right? The world we live in, we face giants, and we have stories in the Bible, accounts of people facing giants, just like we do in everyday life, just like we face. And of course, like I said, we're going to the most obvious facing of giants. Because one of the ways we can face giants, like the title indicates, is we can face giants courageously, with courage. And of course, the best account of this, of course, is David and Goliath. You can't have a sermon series about facing giants without talking about David and Goliath. That's like the most obvious one. The 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're looking at different parts of the account here and looking about how David faces this giant. In this case, quite a literal giant too. Quite a literal giant. So during this time, Saul is currently the king, and they've been at war with the Philistines. They've been at war with the Philistines. They've been battling them. Saul has led numerous successful campaigns against them. And suddenly they have one of their best warriors come forward. One of their best warriors comes forward. Someone by the name of Goliath. Starting in verse 4. The champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. In case you're wondering, that's about 100 pounds. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? Are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man to have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we'll become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. So here we have a literal giant. It says he's 6 cubits and a span. 6 cubits and a span, which in modern day measurements, I believe, according to notes I've actually seen, I think it's like 9'9". 9'9". Now, to give you an idea, the tallest man, or tallest person actually on record, modern day that has been like recorded in modern day, we've got pictures, we've got like officially measured, I believe is 8'10", if I have that right. So Goliath is about almost a foot bigger. Not quite a foot bigger, but almost about 11 inches bigger. So I mean, it's not unthinkable. It could have been someone that massive, that tall. And imagine facing. Okay, I'm 6 foot, right? That's considered pretty average, male height for people nowadays. Some people taller. Some people get closer to 7 feet. Evans is taller than I am, so he's a bit bigger. 6'4", but he's a little bit taller. Imagine facing someone that big. Facing someone that big. Just even someone as big as like the tallest man or some of the tallest people alive, right? Facing someone that tall, and likely also just kind of like big overall, right? Probably has some good, amount of muscle to him. Probably more muscle than I have, which isn't hard, but likely a pretty imposing figure. And here you have Saul and the Israelite army who have led campaigns against the Philistine army. They've led campaign after campaign, and they've been successful, and now the Philistines produce this massive champion, this giant of a man. And they're like, let's settle this battle right here with a one-on-one fight, which is actually fairly common back then. To have a battle settled by a one-on-one fight between the champion of one army and the champion of the other army. Like your two best soldiers face it off, and this will decide the battle instead of having this massive battle going on here. And so the challenge is put forth. And they see the Philistine champion, and Saul, who is a fairly tall and handsome person. That's how he's described when Samuel finds him. He and the rest of the Israelite army, they're terrified. They're scared. But someone's going to come and be courageous. As we continue, we go to verses 32 to 37. This is what happens. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." So David comes, right? He comes to in the front lines here because he's there delivering supplies, delivering some food. And he also kind of wants to talk to his brothers and see his brothers, see how they're doing. And he comes at this time. See, Goliath is putting forth this challenge and does so for 40 days, which 40 is a very significant number in the Bible. It's like a complete number, basically. So it's like the ideal amount of time. It'd be considered giving the Israelites enough time to produce their own champion. And it seems like on that last day, that 40th day, David shows up. And he hears about this. And he starts inquiring about this, about what's going on. He's like, "Hey, what's being offered for defeating this guy?" Because he hears like it's a reward offered. And it's like, "Well, whoever does this can marry the king's daughter and will be given wealth and won't have to pay taxes." Which, I mean, during this season being tax season, we all know how wonderful that would be, wouldn't it? It's like, "Oh, I don't have to pay taxes. Nice. Tax-free." So all kinds of benefits, right? And so David, he goes to Saul and he's like, "I'll take care of this. I'll take this guy on." Now, when Saul is described, remember, Saul is described as being tall and handsome. He's tall among his people, and he's good looking. David is described as being handsome. So Saul is actually taller than David, it would seem. And Saul is terrified. David, being smaller, being younger, is willing to go. And Saul's like, wait, hold on. This guy, this giant, this massive man, he's not only bigger than you, he is more experienced than you in battle. You can't possibly defeat him. And David's like, "Look, I've fought bears and lions, and not only bested them, but I grabbed them by their hair, their fur, and struck them and killed them because they went after the flock that I was looking after." It's all because God has protected me and given me the ability to protect this flock. How many of you have actually, gone, either be at the zoo or like in real life, seen like either like a lion or a bear, like a bear out in the wild or a lion at the zoo? How many of you would be willing to take on one of those animals? But yet David, right? David has taken them on protecting his father's sheep. And he tells Saul this, like, look, I have done this. This Philistine right here, this uncircumcised Philistine, the one who's going against and disrespecting the armies of the living God, right? The people of God, disrespecting God himself, he'll be no different. Saul's like, all right, go ahead. And Saul, he gives him his sword, his armor, and everything. And David's like, wait, hold on, I can't wear this. This is just too, I'm not used to this. Just take it all back. I'll just go as I am. So he goes, as he's dressed, he goes with his staff, a sling, and that's how he's going to go. Just like that. He's going to face this giant courageously. He's going to face him courageously. And this is how everything goes down. Starting in verse 40. How everything is going to happen. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. David over and saw he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David approaches the Philistine, dressed as he is, with his stick that he uses when shepherding the flock, with his sling and 5 stones from the river, 5 smooth stones from the river. And Goliath sees him, and he's like, all right, this young man, he's just a little more than a boy. Some people say that David was a boy when he faced Goliath. I mean, really, this phrase just means he's barely an adult. Like he's just a little more than what a boy would be. He's like just a very young man. So probably in his teens, if at the very earliest, I'd probably put him in this. But in either case, he's a fairly young, seemingly, at least in Goliath's eyes, inexperienced, and has no weapon other than what he can see is a stick. And he's like, you're coming at me with a stick? I have armor, I have sword, I have spear, I have helmet. And you're coming at me with a stick? This is insulting. I'm going to defeat you and feed your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. And that was actually a disgraceful thing to do, because back then it was considered to be like a disgraceful thing to not have a proper burial. So if you're being fed to the wild animals, you're not given a proper burial. It's a way to disgrace your enemies, right? To kind of punish them beyond just killing them. But David is like, look, you come at me with, spear, javelin, sword, you got all these weapons on you, but you know what? You know what? I come before you with my God, right? The one true God, the living God, not your gods of stone, not your gods that don't exist, but with the living God, the one true God. That is how I come before you. I am equipped enough to face you. So, tells him it's like, he's going to deliver you into my hands, and your armies will suffer this same disgraceful fate that you are claiming to do to me. That's what's going to happen to you and your armies. And so they approach. They're about to do battle. Things are going down. And what does he do? He reaches in his pocket, takes one of those smooth stones that he grabbed earlier. He grabbed 5, probably thinking, I don't know how many I'm going to need, but I'm just going to grab 5. That should be plenty. Puts him in his pocket, in his pouch. And then he takes one out, puts it in his sling. And his sling was like this, kind of like a leather pouch with, it would either have like string or just parts of the leather coming out. Not entirely sure which, but basically like these 2 like thin parts that were attached to this pouch. And you put like the rock in there, and you hold on to both sides, and you'd swing it around, and then let go of one of the strings, and it would just open up and launch that rock at something or at someone. And so he does that, and he just slings it at Goliath, right? This guy, he's all armored. He has a helmet on. He's got this bronze scale armor, which is, again, I've seen like a historic image of this. It was all, it's old and tarnished, but it's like basically these like bronze plates made up this kind of armor to protect themselves. He's all armored. He's ready to go. And here David just slings a stone at him, and it strikes him in the forehead. And it's so hard, it actually sinks into his forehead, and he falls down with one stone. It finds that opening, right, where the helmet's not covering, and bam, strikes. And Goliath falls. This heavily armored, all these weapons on him, and he's taken down by a stone. By someone much smaller, much younger. Goliath is delivered into David's hands. And the reason is what David says is basically that battle is not his, right? Battle doesn't belong to him. It belongs to the Lord. And this victory, right? It belongs to the Lord. It belongs to God. A lot of times this story is used as like little guy overcoming the big guy, right? The little one overcoming the big one. Well, you see like MMA fights or boxing matches, they have weight classes for a reason, because someone bigger and heavier than you has a distinct advantage over someone smaller and lighter. It's a very unfair matchup. And here you have a very unfair matchup between these two. And the story is often used for like, someone overcoming some kind of, of adversity, overcoming someone bigger than them, overcoming someone with more power than them. And the emphasis is always put on what the person is doing and what they're able to do to overcome, what they can do to overcome. But here's the problem with that. That's the wrong emphasis. That's not what's being said here. It's not about David's ability to overcome Goliath. David not once indicates that it's about his ability to overcome Goliath. But what does he say? He says, the battle belongs to the Lord. It's because God gave Goliath into David's hands. Gave David the victory. The victory belongs to God. It's because of God that David was able to overcome. Because of God that David was able to overcome. You know what? David recognized this. David knew this. And that's why he could courageously face this giant. He could face this giant with courage, with confidence, because he knew that victory and this battle belonged to God. It was in God's hands, not his hands, not in David's hands, but in God's hands. Victory belonged to God. David was just the vessel through whom that victory was obtained, but it was all in God's hands. So whatever we're facing, whatever giant we face, whatever obstacle, whatever massive thing in our way that we're facing, we can face it with confidence. Because God will get us through. God will give us that victory. Because it's in God's hands, right? In some way, shape, or form, He gives us that victory over what we face. Sometimes it gets us, through whatever we face, and we come out the other side, and we did it. We got through. Sometimes it does away with the obstacle, gets rid of the mountain. Sometimes it gets us through the mountain or over the mountain, but in either case, the victory belongs to Him. It's because of Him. And so we want to face those giants with courage. Always remember, victory belongs to God. The battle belongs to God. Not because of us. Because of God. Right? It's not because we just somehow have this ability to overcome these giants or overcome these obstacles, but it's because God has made us able to. God has given us that ability. God has made the way for us to overcome. That victory belongs to God. So next time you're facing those giants, next time you're facing those obstacles, even though, you may have that kind of gut reaction of initial shock, initial panic, stand courageous, right? Stand with courage. Know that victory belongs to God. And that's that final thought I'll leave you with. When facing giants, know that victory belongs to God. When facing giants, know that victory belongs to God. Face them with courage. Stand strong. No matter what you're facing, no matter how insurmountable it seems, victory belongs to God. Victory as He wills it, right? Victory as He will have it done. After all, our God, He conquered sin, something we couldn't. He conquered death, again, something we couldn't. Victory belongs to Him. We have that victory because of Him. So when facing giants, know that victory belongs to God. Let's go ahead and thank Him for that victory. Lord, we thank You so much for being victorious, for giving us victory. And Lord, we know it's all in Your hands. You know that whatever happens, whatever ends up going down, whatever ends up the outcome, it's in your hands. And the victory, the battle, it all belongs to you. It's all because of you. Lord, help us to face giants, face obstacles, face whatever is in our way with courage. Help us to stand strong, stand with faith in you, and know and trust in your victory. It can be difficult, Lord. That initial reaction is to panic, but Lord, help us to stand courageous and trust in you, trust in your victory. And we thank you so much for that, Lord, for being able to do that. In Jesus' name,